The Archaeomusicology Interest Group Committee and Fabrizio Serra, editore, decided to award the AIA Telestes special mention to Miriam Bueno Guardia, o Guardia, I don't know, for her PhD thesis, La representación de la danza en el Reino Nuevo egipcio. This is the motivation for this award. The aim of Miriam Bueno Guardia's doctoral research focused on the representation of dance during the New Kingdom was to make a compendium of these representations. These images are located in different tombs and temples, and their iconography and style vary depending on the type of dance represented, the occasion when it was performed, and even the date of the representation, as there is a stylistical evolution within these scenes. In this thesis, the musical accompaniment of these scenes has been studied as both activities are closely connected to the Egyptian religious beliefs. Congratulations, Miriam. The award includes an annual subscription to Telestes journal provided by the Fabrizio Serra. So I would like to invite Miriam Bueno Guardia to introduce her work. Please, Miriam, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the special mention, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to stay here presenting a summary of my doctoral research. Okay, it's focused on the representation of dance in the Egyptian New Kingdom, and I will shortly make an approach to it. Well, both dance and music are two activities of great importance in the culture of ancient Egypt. The aim of my research was, first of all, to make a compendium of New Kingdom dance representation. Starting from that initial list of scenes, I proceeded to their classification and the study of their iconography, aesthetics, and meaning, as well to compare the representations looking for possible conventions or innovations. Thus, the ultimate objective of my research was to draw conclusions about the entire representation of dance during the Egyptian New Kingdom. It is something unprecedented so far, not for lack of material, but for lack of exhaustive research. But to understand the characteristics of dance, we should also study some music scenes because they used to appear together many times, and the iconography of music can help us to complete the symbolism or the interpretation of the dance scenes. These scenes can be found both in tombs and temples of this period, which covers from the 16th century BC to the 11th century BC. The context in which we find more dance scenes are the private Theban tombs that belonged to the elite of the population. These buildings are excavated on the mountain, and their basic structure is the one that we can see on the screen. 3 rooms that form an inverted T. They are burial places, but also liminal spaces where the living could contact with the dead and the gods. Focusing on the dance scenes, we could classify them in 3 different groups: dance within banquet scenes, the dance of the Mu, and other religious dances that appear in different contexts. Within the banquet scenes, we sometimes find a female orchestra in which we see a girl or a musician dancing. These scenes are generally linked to the beautiful Feast of the Valley, an important festival that took place on the Theban mountain. During this celebration, the living entered the mentioned tombs and celebrated a shared banquet with the deceased. The pose of the dancers that appear in these banquet scenes is almost always the same: a girl or a woman with flexed and separated legs and a heel raised. These dancers used to be related to fertility and to sexuality, as they are thought to help the deceased on his rebirth in the afterlife. That is the reason why they appear naked or wearing semi-transparent clothes. Other symbols related to this idea are the lotus flowers and the unguent cone that these dancers used to wear on their head. The other principal context in which we find dance scenes is the funerary processions. Within them, we can see groups of female dancers called mu dancers. This word mu literally means those who belong to water, and thus these dancers are thought to be related to the boatmen. Mu dancers were part of the ideal funeral, and they appeared from the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom, probably related to their important symbolism. We think that they were the characters that gave permission to the burial and to the deceased to enter the afterlife. According to Brunner Traut, there are different types of Mu dancers. The first one is always depicted with a tall crown similar to the white crown and with a raised foot, like performing the step with which they could cross from the world of the living to the realm of the dead. The second type are the same characters in a building called Hall of the Mu, but they never appear dancing. The third type is a symmetric pair of dancers without the crown. They always appear with the arms and one leg flexed, as we can see on the screen. I must mention here that we don't find musical accompaniment to these scenes. We can also find other religious dances in the Theban tombs, such as the Hatoric dance we see on the left or the acrobatic dance that also appears on temples. This last dance is always performed by women, and it is supposed to be a jump or a wheel movement that allowed the dancers to move with the religious processions. But we also find other dance scenes outside the Theban necropolis. On the private tombs of El Kab, we find similar dances with the same iconography described. Dance within banquet scenes and dances performed by the Mu dancers. In Amarna, the city founded by Akhenaton, we also find private tombs with dance scenes. They are mostly female orchestras with a pose similar to the one described before, but with a different canon. During this period, there is an elongation of the human figure, and the curved line becomes more important. We can also see how the figures are more close between them. The musical instruments also change, with a bigger importance of the tambourines. Other dance we find here is the pantomimic dance, performed by men, probably foreigners. We can notice here an important dynamism of the figures that we couldn't see on the scenes from the first part of the period. Lastly, we also find dance scenes on the Memphis tombs. They always show female dancers, and we can see how they still maintain some of the artistic characteristic of the Amarna period, as these scenes are mostly from the last years of the 18th dynasty. But as I said before, there are also dance scenes on the walls of different temples. On the temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, we find a Libyan dance and an acrobatic dance. The first one is a foreign dance performed with boomerangs that could be used as castanets. The second one is the same type of dance that we saw on the Theban tombs, and in this case, it is linked to the beautiful feast of the valley once again. In the Luxor temple, we find a huge representation of the Opet festival, where we can see some foreign dancers as Libyan or Nubian dancers, and another acrobatic dance. Also related to different festivals are the dance scenes found in the Karnak temple, where we can see, among others, an acrobatic dance and a dance related to the Set festival. Thus, the study carried out on dance representations in the Egyptian New Kingdom leads us to draw different conclusions. The first one is related to their location. Most of the scenes analyzed during this research are found in private tombs. Geographically, most of these scenes are in the Theban area. Therefore, we can conclude that the greatest source of dance performances dating from the Egyptian New Kingdom is the Theban necropolis. If we talk about their chronology, the vast majority of the images belong to the 18th dynasty. Thanks to the study carried out, we can also categorize dance according to its typology or the context in which it is represented. Most of these types of dance are distinguishable by their own iconography, and the dancers represented in different gestures according to the dance they perform. But we can also draw some general conclusions about dance itself in the Egyptian New Kingdom. The first one is that there are dance scenes both in religious and secular context. Likewise, it is a gender-segregated activity, which means that we do not see male and female characters dancing together, but they always appear in separate groups. Some of the types of dance found are unique to one location, but other scenes appear in different sites. The presence of the same type of dance in different geographical or architectural contexts may tell us about the existence of patterns or models that were followed by artists when carrying out the decorative works commissioned. It is something common in the art of ancient Egypt. However, they are not simple copies. In the different representations, we can find some small changes in the composition or in the details of the scenes, or even some innovations. We cannot forget to talk about the relationship between music and dance. While in previous periods, musicians and dancers were frequently represented in different registers, in the New Kingdom, this does not occur in the same way. And now, there are many representations of musicians and dancers together, or even of instrumentalists who appear dancing, highlighting the case of the lute female players who appear dancing in the banquet scenes. Thus, thanks to this research, we can see that dance was an important activity during the Egyptian New Kingdom, being part of several celebrations attested both in tombs and temples. Thank you very much for your attention.